Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in Torah. Amen. Okay. So tonight, we're going to start right off with the with the burnt offering. That was the first one that was listed, and this is basically, I think we're going to be staying in the first few chapters of Leviticus, and this is where the burnt offering starts out in Leviticus 3 or 1 in the third Leviticus first chapter, third verse, and then again it talks about it in the 6th chapter in the 8 through 13. Now there was some questions that some have asked that I wanted to answer before we jump into all of these. That people have asked, are there sacrifices done today? Does anyone, do the Jews do sacrifices today? And no, they don't. Now we've heard that just recently over in Israel, the Temple Institute is they're starting to train up priests to do these sacrifices and to get them all geared up and educated as to how to do these things. But as far as we know, there's no one that's doing the sacrifices. And so if they're not doing them today, when did that all stop? The sacrificial system, of course, was stopped in 70 A.D. when the Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans, and God had said that you will do your sacrifices where I tell you to do, or where I have my name, and that was Jerusalem. So once the temple was gone, then the Jews, they couldn't say, well, let's move to Jordan or Petra or someplace else, and we'll just do the sacrifices there. No, that would have been against God's laws and his instructions, so they couldn't go ahead and do them there. You remember that when the northern kingdom split off from the southern kingdom, and there was the northern kingdom was pretty much situated up in Dan, that they set up a temple, or some kind of a temple with an altar, and they offered sacrifices up there at that point because they were trying to keep their kingdom together up there and have a place where people could where they could offer sacrifices so that the people wouldn't go back down to the southern kingdom into Jerusalem and do the sacrifices down there. Of course, by doing that, they were violating the very law that they were trying to uphold. So it was counterproductive at that point. So since the temple has been destroyed, we don't have a place to offer sacrifices anymore. And according that's the Jewish reason. Then those of us that believe in Yeshua, then we know that the sacrificial system was superseded by the once and for all sacrifice of Yeshua. So we would not have to do the sacrifices anyway. And so that Orthodox Jews believe that when the Messiah comes, they don't recognize Yeshua as the Messiah. So when the Messiah comes, they say a place will be provided for sacrificial purposes. Of course, right now on the Temple Mount, we have the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome on the Rock, both Muslim structures, and so there's no place for the temple. So do the Jews want to resume sacrifices? And the Orthodox Jews do. I mean, in the daily prayer services, they call for the restoration of the temple and resumption of the rituals, including sacrifice. Other movements of Judaism have removed that requirement or that portion of the liturgy from some of the prayer books from the Sidduras. Did the Kohanim, the priest, or anybody else, did they eat the animals that were offered? And the answer to that is yes, and we'll get into that. Certain types were eaten by only the priests, and then certain were only eaten by specified priests. And so anyway, we'll look into some of that. And so the question that PETA and other ones will talk about today, they said, well, isn't animal sacrifice cruel? Actually, it's no more cruel than if they do it correctly. It would be no more cruel than the slaughter of animals for consumption. In fact, it would be much more humane than some of the ways that they do slaughter today, for the animals, because nowadays it's just it's an industrialized thing where they go and they use a stun gun and it pokes a hole in the brain of the cow and or the whatever, cow or lamb or goat, whatever they're killing for eating. And it kills them, but it's not like when they would the priest would take an extremely sharp knife, and they would slice the jugular vein of the animal and then walk it around so that the slice was so precise and so sharp that the animals really didn't realize. They didn't jump around. They didn't show any signs of stress. And kosher meat today is slaughtered in the same fashion, where they will slit the throat of the vein of the animal, and then it's allowed to bleed out, kind of in peace, and so they don't recognize any particular trauma. There are people that are trained to do that sort of thing for the kosher butchers. But it's you say, well, how could you do that? How could you slice an animal and they would not know it? Well, there's sometimes where you're cut or whatever, and you bleed and you don't even know it. I've just this last week I was out working someplace and in the garden or wherever, and my daughter looked at me and said, "What did you do?" And I looked and I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Your arm." And I looked down at my arm, and I was dripping blood all the way down my arm and down my fingers, and it was dripping off, and I'd somehow poked a hole in my arm, and I didn't even realize where it was. So it was very evidently a very sharp poke, and I didn't feel any pain. So it's possible to do that. So and those are some of the questions that people ask, especially for the in the Orthodox, the Chabad community. They said, "Do Jews obtain forgiveness through without sacrifices?" And their view on the Chabad view on that is that forgiveness is obtained through repentance, prayer, and tzedakah, or charity or good deeds. And so that's kind of what they do now, that there's no sacrifices. And so they do not, isn't blood sacrifice required to obtain forgiveness? And their answer is no. Although animal sacrifice is one means of obtaining forgiveness, there's no there are non-animal offerings as well, and there are other means of obtaining forgiveness that do not involve sacrifices at all. So, they point to the book of Jonah, where the entire community of Nineveh was, they repented and they fasted and they were forgiven by God, but they never offered any sacrifice, any blood sacrifice or otherwise. And so after the temple was destroyed, a lot of what they talked about, temple service and so forth, involved around the table. It was I'll use the word communion, or that's not the right word, because that has Christian connotations, but fellowship, table fellowship became very important also. So that they had to come up with something to justify their some kind of forgiveness. So let's go on with this burnt offering here. The offerings were called korbanot in the Hebrew. You remember that Yeshua chastised the Pharisees at one point because they were neglecting their parents, because they would say, well, what I would use to give to my parents, we call it korban, which means it's an offering. So I can give that as an offering and be absolved from my responsibility of taking care of my parents. So that comes from that same word, korbanot. So the purposes of the sacrifices were not specifically just forgiveness of sin. There were others too. As we'll get into these things, there was a sin offering, there was a fellowship offering, just a peace offering. So there's different ones. So it was not just for the atonement of sin. So anyway, let's go ahead with this burnt offering here. And like I said, it was from Leviticus, the first chapter. And it was I guess you'd call it a kind of a consecration offering. That this is probably the most well known of any of the offerings, because all of the patriarchs, they talk, when they were in the Bible for they would do something and they were going to be making an offering. They would do a burnt offering, meaning that they burn it was completely consumed. And so that's really the most common. When Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, that would have been a burnt offering to the Lord. And as we know, God provided a ram, and they burned it all up. And so I've got I got a picture here, and it didn't quite show up as clearly as I wanted to, but this was kind of a summary of what the burnt offering was. It was an intentional sin, and it was done at the bronze, the altar there at the Tabernacle, or later on at the temple. And so it would have been a young animal, a bull, ram, a goat, or if you were very poor, a dove or a pigeon. And so it depended on your wealth, so that God looked down and says, well, look, if you're a wealthy person, you can afford, you pay, or you do this with a bull. But he didn't denigrate against the poor people. It says, well, you're just you're poor, and so your turtle doves or your pigeons are less of a sacrifice to you, because it was still their sacrifice. You remember that in the temple, Yeshua commented about the widow who gave the 2 pennies, the 2 mites, or whatever they called it, and he said that she gave more than the others because to her that was a sacrificial giving. She gave all that she had. Now the burnt offering was the word up there, olah, and that's one of the it means to go up, and so that when they burn the offering in it, the smoke rises up, and so what that's what that word means. Means ascension, and it's actually got the same root word as aliyah, which is used to describe moving to Israel, or actually ascending to the podium to say the blessings for the Torah. So the olah, an olah, this burnt offering, it was completely burned. It was totally consumed on the outer altar, that bronze altar in the courtyard of the tabernacle, or in the courtyard of the temple later on, and no part of it was eaten by anyone. And because this offering represented a complete submission to God's will, and so the entire offering then was offered up to God. So basically, it can't be used if it was burned up, and so that's where that comes from. Is that the burnt offering was for total dedication to the Lord. The next one let me see here, I got is the grain offering, and that one was that's in Leviticus 2, and then you see the notes there, Leviticus 6 and then 7, and I've got a picture there of what that would be. That was a gift, and there again it was at the bronze altar, and they had the various combinations there. You could do some of them with flour, and some of them were with roasted grain, but they would add oil and frankincense and then salt. But they didn't eat all of it. These grain offerings were offered along with the animal sacrifices. Now, there's also a little bit of confusion if you're reading just strictly the King James Version, because what they'll I think in some places they call it a meat offering instead of a meal offering, or a grain, or something like that. So it's a little bit confusing. So forth. So anyway, these grain offerings, and they were it's an offering of fine flour or unleavened baked goods mixed with oil, and a handful of this offering was burned with incense on the altar fire, and the rest went to the priest. That was part of their compensation. And so let's see. And this, in a way, I guess you'd say this grain offering. It's very. Whenever we talk about bread, of course, we talk about Yeshua being the bread of life, and his life being unleavened, it was without sin. And also when they added the oil to it, the oil of the Holy Spirit. These are all things that in some ways it's kind of hard to come up with a scriptural representation for it, but there is a picture there of that. So again, the grain offering. Now there was a fellowship offering, and this one was the Hebrew for it was a zevah shelamim, and this one it was a kind of a peace offering. You know, this word here, shalem, it has roots. It's very similar to shalom, so it has roots in that word. And it was a peace offering that expressed thanks or gratitude to God for his his bountiful mercies. And so it does kind of hark to the word shalom and peace. So it said a portion of the offering was burnt on the altar, and then a portion given to the Kohanim, the priest, and then a portion of it was then given was to be eaten by the person offering the sacrifice. And so everybody took part in this fellowship or peace offering. And there's lots of different there's some different wordings on this. That is thanksgiving, todah, which means todah in Hebrew means thank you. And in fact, it was in Judaic practice, this kind of offering was obligatory for people who survived a life-threatening crisis, and also for free will offerings, and then offerings made after fulfillment of a vow. And note that this offering has nothing to do with sin. And in fact, if you look in the Talmud, it says that in the age of the Messiah, when there is no more sin, this will be the only class of offering that is to be brought to the temple. Now that's Talmud, and I read it a little bit differently, because there will be the way I look at it, I read it, there will be sacrifices that were given as a memorial, not for any kind of atonement for sins. So the parts that were burned on this fellowship offering were the fat, the kidneys, and part of the liver, and that was what was burned, and then the rest of it was eaten by the offerer and by the priest. And so this sacrifice is it's associated with feasting, and it's obviously a very positive character here for much more positive than, say, the sin offering, the guilt offering, and some of these other ones when you're in trouble and trying to get back into communion with God. So, and let's see, I think I've got a picture. Yeah, here's a picture of what could be given as a peace offering. So that they have the animals, and it was done at the bronze altar, and so they were offered along with bread, either unleavened or leavened. And so again, this was stuff that was actually consumed by the priest and the person offering the sacrifice. So then we can go into the sin sacrifices, the hatat, and I think I've got this wrong here. I do up here at the. I'll correct this when I send it out on the because it's shalom. Up there at the top where I've got hatat. I didn't notice that until just now. So when I was doing my copy and paste, I must have hit an old paste on that because it popped up the wrong word there. So I'll fix that before I send it out. But that's in Leviticus 4 and then on into 6, and then Leviticus 9. Now, this was to atone for sins that were committed unknowingly, especially where there was where no restitution was possible, and this sin offering was not sufficient for defiant rebellion against God. This would not get you out of this would not get you out of trouble with the Lord if you knowingly sinned. But this would be for unknowingly sinning, and the burnt offering, the full burnt offering would be more in keeping with that, according to some of the more traditional Jewish sources that I looked at. So the sin offering for the high priest, and I think I got, okay, if you were a priest or for the entire community, if they offered up a sacrifice for the entire community, it would have been a bull. And if you were a ruler, then the sin offering, guilt offering, the sin offering would have been for the ruler. It would have been a goat, and then for just a regular old person, it could be a female goat or 2 doves or 2 pigeons. And also, if you were really, really poor, then you could offer up flour for the sin offering. And so that was what that particular offering entailed. And the part that was burned up on the altar, let's see if I got that, was the fatty portion that went up in the fire, and then the rest of it was given to the priest, and then they would eat the meat, and then everything else would have been burned outside the camp. And so then if you had if the person offering the sin was a ruler or a commoner, the remainder of the goat or the lamb was to be eaten in the tabernacle court. So and this particular sin offering, sin offering here, it prefigures the fact of Yeshua's death, in that he was made sin for us, and that he suffered outside the gates of Jerusalem. So again, those are some of those things that we draw conclusions back to from these sacrifices. And the next one that I've got was the guilt offering, and it was again, It was for sins committed unknowingly, and we go back up to the guilt and the sin offering. Very, very, very similar in many ways. It was to atone for sins committed unknowingly, especially where restitution was possible. And this was it was specified that you're supposed to bring a ram for that. And this particular, in fact, I've got it written down here as far as the difference between this guilt offering or trespass offering and the sin offering. And they're very similar to each other, but there are some differences. The sin offering dealt with sin against God. The trespass offering and the guilt offering emphasized sin against God and mankind. The sin offering dealt with the nature of the sin, and the trespass offering, the guilt offering, it emphasized the acts of sin. So the sin offering, again, going back to the other, dealt with the guilt of the sinner. The trespass offering emphasized injury against God and mankind. So it was more pointing to, well, you've done this, now look at the consequences of what you've done. This is the kind of thing that you do. Now, and also I was reading one of the Chabad commentaries that they said, well, a lot of times people would do a guilt offering because it was, okay, you committed unknowingly, but then if you did a sin offering, that was more of an admission of guilt, and you're admitting that you did it wrong, so that you were wrong. So they would, in some cases, do the guilt offering because that was, like in today's courts, you'd say, you go to court and you say no contest or nolo contendere, that okay, I'm not admitting to it, but here I'll just pay I'll pay the fine. So the sin offering dealt with atonement or the expiation of the guilt, and the trespass offering, this guilt offering here, emphasized the satisfaction and reparation for the wrong committed. So this was the guilt offering was kind of a way of getting back into fellowship with the Lord. And this, again, foreshadows the fact that Yeshua was our trespass offering. He was the one that is going to get us back into fellowship with the Lord. Now, then we have a class of offerings that were done every day, and this one is called Tamid, which it was done. They had the offering in the morning, and then in the evening. This was a daily sacrifice, and this was one of those that they did every day, and so it was basically you would take two yearling lambs, and then one in the morning and one in the evening, and 4 to 5 liters of fine flour, and then 1.87 liters of wine. I guess it was easier, more accurate measuring of the wine than it was of the fine flour. But they would put those in, and then these were totally burnt, so they were a burnt offering, and the tamid means a standing or perpetual sacrifice, same as Messiah. Yeshua was sacrificed for us, and it was a perpetual sacrifice. It was once and for all. He's no longer sacrificing every day. It was that he did it one time for all of our sins. And so a lot of the temple things that were described in the Bible, they talked about the morning and the evening sacrifices, and Yeshua was crucified. They say at the time of or people say it was at Pesach. It was at the time of the evening sacrifice. That I have a little problem with, because the lambs were slaughtered at 3 o'clock, and then the evening sacrifice would have been somewhere along later on. But anyway, those were that's when they would have the first of the sacrifices would have been at dawn, and then they say that he was tied to the lamb was tied to the altar at dawn, sacrificed at 9 a.m., and then the second lamb was tied to the altar at noon and sacrificed at 3 p.m. So it really wasn't at the twilights, even though they call it between the twilights. This sacrifice is between the twilights. So as we know, Yeshua was killed. He died around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which would have been the time for the Passover lamb, and then this daily sacrifice, if indeed it was. As they say, that they tied it to the altar at 12 and then slaughtered it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and we've got a couple of other ones here. Now, I wanted to bring this one out. We've talked about, I can't remember if it was in a class that I did or a sermon on just, one of the parshas, but the red heifer. And supposedly that they did have a totally, completely perfect red heifer that was born in Texas, and would have, that they were going to take it to Israel and try to use this heifer as breeding stock to breed more of the red heifers. And it's kind of hard to track this one down because Truth or Fiction or Snopes wouldn't be following this one. So it's a little tough to get this one and run it to ground. But I did want to just mention the red heifer, and that's in Numbers 19, 1 through 22, and that it was to be without blemish and never yoked, and it was slaughtered outside the camp, not at the altar. And everyone associated with the sacrifice became unclean. The guy the priest that slaughtered the heifer, the one that burned it up, the one that picked up all the ashes, and so forth. Every one of them became unclean until the evening, and then after the sun went down, then they would be considered again clean again for temple worship and temple service. Now, in this, when they burned it all up, they burned the entire thing. I mean, every bit of it was burned up, even to all the intestines, even the manure. The whole thing of it was burned up, and then they mixed it with cedar and hyssop when they were burning it, and then it was mixed with running water, living water, as it were, and then applied to people with hyssop. Now, you remember that the blood on the doorposts in Egypt was applied with hyssop. So it has a connotation of salvation and for cleansing, along with the two are kind of side by side. The salvation from the death angel in Egypt, and then the cleansing in the temple. And the significance, of course, with that was Yeshua took on our sins, so he became unclean so that then we can be clean. So this particular sacrifice here was one of those that it's really strange because everyone involved in the actual preparing of the red heifer, the slaughter, and the whole bits of it became unclean. And this is one of those that in some of the Jewish writings they talk about that Solomon, of course, supposedly the wisest man in the history of the world, said that he did not understand why this was, that why the person that slaughtered the animal, that prepared it, that burned it, that then picked up all the ashes and brought them back into the temple, all of them became unclean by touching it. But then they could take those same ashes, mix it with the water, and sprinkle it on somebody, and then they would be cleansed from their sins or from their uncleanness. I think they would use this for say if you had a leper come back to be certified that he was clean from his leprosy. And there are a number of other sacrifices also that were there that I wanted to hit the major ones here, but there's new moon sacrifices there. Again, that was one of the sweet aroma sacrifices. It was compulsory, and that it was an offering of 2 young bulls along with the grain offering and 1 ram. Now, this would have been corporate. This would have been a corporate sacrifice with 1 ram with the cereal offering, and then 7 yearling lambs with another grain offering. And so these were actually in addition then to the daily offerings. So at the new moon celebration, these would also have been offered. So when you get right down to it, there some of these offerings could be compounded, like on the Day of Atonement and other ones that, and then like during Sukkot, there's a group of offerings there that it just they compound onto each other, and so really there would have been many animals sacrificed, say during Sukkot. But anyway, this pretty much hits with what I had prepared for tonight as the offerings. In the notes that I'm going to send you, I basically have 2 or 3 or 4 articles that I've just collected that explain some of these things that. And one of them is going to be, I'll tell you, it's going to be Chabad, from the Chabad website. So you take that as it is, that not all of the things that we would believe that they believe, and then there's things that they believe that we don't believe. So you look at that, and then one of the other. There's several of these matrices out there that pull these things together. So it was kind of interesting to pull all of these things in and to see what how they compared to each other, and then what I think possibly you could probably spend a lot more time on each and every one of these sacrifices.